I'm a huge psychological thriller fan, just ever since I was a teen. I don't see many psychological thrillers that really delve into the mind of the characters. Can you just talk about really exploring the psyche of these people as opposed to just turning this thriller into a trope-filled guilty pleasure? This really went deep down inside as far as the psyche goes.
Yeah, I mean, what I thought was really interesting about this, also the parallels with, the apartment setups, like people living on top of each other. It almost, to me, it seemed very mathematical, it's like partitions of the brain. And so what I thought was really interesting is the Cordelia character and the male, Johnny Flynn's character, that they're kind of two parts of a whole. And the slow unraveling is quite nice, but rather than it being I didn't want it to be sort of the classic stereotype of a woman losing her mind or psychological unraveling, but more that her performance that is like a choice to exist in the world starts to come off, if you understand me, so that she's figured out a way to get by in society that is a struggle for her by wearing this kind of this way of characterization, which is to be quite meek and mild-mannered and mouse-like. And as she becomes more stressed, her true self erupts.
I was also, until the final minute, I was completely unsettled. I had no idea where I was. How did you, as a co-writer and a collaborator, how did you guys just set that tone? Because that seems very challenging to actually, like that's a very ambitious benchmark to set, just to keep the viewers really unsettled all throughout the narrative.
I think what's really lends quite well is you mean the constant sense of like foreboding and tension.
Right, and the idea of perception, and I thought it was just really turned its head on, you're always not in a comfortable footing, and I think that's a really great part of Cordelia, the fact that you never feel settled in one place, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, exactly. What works very well actually is I think the visual of the apartment, it has this very strange, like what we spoke about initially is that the interior should look as though it's almost like an alive place. Like it's almost like the insides, like the entrails of like it's inside a whale or something. You know how you'd imagine it. It's like the walls look wet. They look as though it's actually an alive entity. This building at the insides of this apartment, and that is so that's quite terrifying in itself. But and then the parallel of that is that Cordelia's perception of it, or is it actually so? And I've always been really interested in what happens to the human mind when you compromise what it needs to be healthy, which is isolation is a key factor to that. And what I really loved about the Frank and Cordelia dynamic is that because they're both so fragile in a sense, and they're both holding in so much sort of menace, that it is the break of that, like the counterplay between each one and how they work as a duo, which is really interesting because it's like vulnerability and menace combined and switching position.
This is just a curious question. I'm so excited after watching Cordelia. I can't wait to see your next film. It is In Us All, in which you also direct. And just wondering, from the outside looking in, is writing a solitary experience for you, and how do you overcome that? Or maybe in that isolation or being solitary, does it give you the room to really explore, the human condition? Do you find that a freeing or liberating space to actually be alone and to actually write, pen to pad?
I think everything I write is a slightly different experience, because so my film it's completely my own universe. Like it's my film, it's entirely my vision, my world. Whereas Cordelia was a collaboration, and it really is, it's Adrian's story, the director. It's his story entirely. He wrote it in 2007, an actress called Sally Hawkins, and they developed it for a while, and then a huge amount of time passed, and I worked with Adrian. I was on a show he was directing, and because it had sort of been sitting, I think on a shelf somewhere, he saw some similarities between myself and Sally, who I knew also. And so he brought it to me. And my collaborative aspect with Adrian on that film was, he said, well, if, he's so generous in that he said, if you're going to play this role, then it's important to have your a bit of your voice infused through it. But very much I was honoring his world and his vision. So
Amazing.
it's always a different thing, So when I wrote my own film, it was exactly as you say. It was I went away for 3 weeks into a room, and there's a big process where, in order to get, I was awarded a development fund, it's like a filmmakers fund, so 1,000 people apply, and then it becomes 12, and go through a very big vetting process that they have in the UK, like with government funds. So you don't just and so that's a huge discipline that you have to go.
Yeah, speaking of discipline, I was reading a past interview where you said just being an actor and just learning from other sets. It's not just you. For you, has your experience been you just don't go on the set and do your job? You're there to actually really explore the filmmaking process. And wondering, when did you really know that one day you'd become a filmmaker? Was that easy early from the get-go as a youth, or did you grow into this craft?
No, I mean, it's funny. My whole evolution has been unusual. Like, I grew up in Switzerland and Germany and places where, to conceive of even, I didn't know these jobs existed, to be honest. I never saw an English language film. I didn't watch television. I saw mostly French films on Canal Plus. Like, that's how I grew up. And then I went to art school, and I went to Parsons in New York, but I always saw myself as I mean, I guess the work I did was somewhat, now we understand what a filmmaker is, and someone who is like an auteur, but I ended up acting kind of by fluke. I was street cast in something, and I was very lucky to be on the set of some really quite brilliant filmmakers who are all inclusive. And so I found every process of films that I was in a learning process. Like, I think the first film I was in I just started out on TV, but and that's very collaborative. It was like British comedy, and so they encouraged me to write. And so I was working with Jennifer Saunders and a man here called Jack D, and people that I really learned from. And then the first film I was on was Bright Stars, Jane Campion, who always has been very important in my life. And then I worked with just lots of very quite brilliant women, and I was very lucky to be in that films that had those sort of collaborative sensibilities.
Yeah, I really love how Cordelia, it can actually be taken in so many different ways. The ending is very open-ended and interpretive. Can you just talk about, was that one of your, in the collaboration, was that one of the main intentions, where it's not just an authorship between co-writers, but it's the third author, maybe the viewer, and his or her reaction or interpretation of the events? Was that one of the greatest parts of doing Cordelia for you?
You mean the ending specifically?
Yeah, yeah, maybe and not to give too much away. Yeah, but the ending specifically, I think, is very open ended, and one can actually interpret it in so many ways. So, did you?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
It's funny because this is where I find that's where I learned my place, is that because I did a pass on the script, and in the end, it was like a pass from my perspective. But ultimately, this is a combination of Adrian's experiences and his imagination. So very much was his world. And I kept saying, I became his actor and his performer. And, he holds secrets. So I did keep saying to him, so what happened? Like, I don't, without giving the ending away, I kept wanting to say, like, I can't say it without giving the ending away, but like, I was in the same position as an audience per se. So he would not tell me, very simply. And I had to play it as though I was just Cordelia, just play the truth of it, without knowing. Actually, that's what I basically just did. I performed as an individual who is lost in a control. I hate to use the words like psychotic break, but what she has done is she's lost her control. And I think Cordelia is a woman who's existed by controlling her environment. And in this period of time, which is like 3 days of a weekend, she's lost control and therefore perspective, because somebody else has imposed on her life, and everything goes inside out and upside down. And that is, what so many things that that's what are the components of psychological horror through the ages, from like the classic films of Repulsion and everything like that. And The Shining was exactly what happens, So that's how I played it.
I have a curious question, and maybe this is not a very easy question to answer, but do you have a analysis or theory on why Jane Campion, as far as a storyteller, filmmaker, has just stayed on this level that very few filmmakers, storytellers can reach? Do you have a theory or perception just from having worked with her? Because
I don't know. I mean, she just is though. I don't know. I think what it is she never strays from what's in her gut. There's always an absolute fierce authenticity and a keen eye and awareness on humanity. I've only worked with her once. I've known her a very long time and we're so close. And there's a real deep excavation for the truth and everything. I mean, from the what decorates the set, from the production design to the materials that are used in costuming, everything is very authentically true. And I think that's what carries through in each study and story. Because I mean, her work is still quite diverse, always has been.
Final question for you is, when are we going to see It Is in Us All? When is that coming out? When can I check it out? And I'm excited to see it.
Oh, thanks. I don't have exact dates. There is an American release. I don't know the dates. It will probably be like late fall or early what year are we in now? Early 2023. Yeah, that kind of time, like Christmassy.
Really love Cordelia. Thank you so much for your time, Antonia.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you.